Hey everyone, welcome to my first mix breakdown. Today we're going to be looking at my band's cover of Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine, which also features our good friend Mr. Stephen Anthony, or Stevie AK as some of you know. The premise behind these covers is as we're continuously searching for a new vocalist and bassist to join the group, we figured we bring on guest vocalists and just do these covers, which allows us to not only release material as we are working through these hurdles, but it allows us to collaborate with a lot of talented individuals. So this has been a really fun process for us, and has been refreshing to be able to get new material out that fills in our catalog until we get album 2 out, which will be out hopefully soon. With that being said, we're just going to break everything down as best as I remember, since this was finished off about 2 months ago, give or take. So we'll break everything down accordingly and just kind of show you the things that I did, the why, and just kind of take it from there. First and foremost, I want to be able to play the song for you so you can have an idea of what it sounded like before the master, which is really not that much different, but just for you guys to be able to get an idea of what the track sounds like. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and play it and break it down from there.
Come with it now! Come with it now! The microphone explode, shatter in the mold. Either drop the hits like De La or get the fuck off the commode with the sure shot. Sure to make the bodies drop. Drop it, don't copy, yo. Don't call this a co-op. Terror reigns, stringent, quenching the thirst of the power dons. That five-sided fist is gone. That rotting soul around the face of Mother Earth gets bigger. The trigger's cold, empty your purse. Rally round the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally round the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally round the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally round the family with a pocket full of shells. Weapons, not food, not homes, not shoes, not need, just feed the war cannibal animal. I walk the corner to the rubble that used to be a library, line up to the mine cemetery now. What we don't know kicks the contracts alive and moving. They don't gotta burn the books, they just remove them
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. I like to be able to give some premise before we dig into the plugin stuff and everything to kind of go about how I went about with tracking it. So first and foremost, this was my first, I guess, official song that I've ever tracked. So I was still kind of on a learning curve, figuring out levels and how to record and just rather just recording things well. So although these tracks are not maybe super polished or anything like that, I feel that really it was still a learning experience for me. So let's just go ahead and break everything down, really. And another thing to mention is that I know that a lot of songs nowadays are quantized, which newer tracks are quantized, but this one I did not quantize. I pretty much did one take on the drums and got the take that I wanted out of it and just kind of went from there. Just because for this song, and really at the time, I was feeling it out and felt that it just, I really wanted to capture what it would feel like if you were in the same room as the band and kind of make it more of a live show feel. And so kind of leaving things, I mean, there's a couple little edits here and there to kind of tidy things up, but really at the end of the day, everyone just kind of went in and tracked it. So it almost again has that feeling as if you were there, just kind of giving it more audience engagement. So that said, and I feel like it just aligns itself to a much more, again, organic, fun, engaging sound to it. So let's start off with the drums, which is usually the most exciting for me because I am a drummer and I am obsessed over drums. And this was, being able to dig into my own drum sound and pick things out is really fun. So drums are pretty straightforward, as you can see. It's just kick, snare, overheads, room, hi-hat, ride, and a crush bus. Since there are no toms here, didn't really need those tracks, so it was pretty straightforward. And so it's just dialing in a nice punchy, um, big room sound and just having a lot of energy behind it. Each of the drums were captured with a different selection of microphones. So kick, you had an Audix D6. Snare top was a Grinelli Audio SM57, which is just a right angle SM57. Snare bottom is an Audix i5, and then my overheads, hi-hat, and my ride microphones are small diaphragm condensers from Laudon Audio. They are the Laudon Audio LA 120 microphones. And then the rooms are the Laudon Audio LA 220 large diaphragm condenser microphones, which are stuffed in my bathroom next to me, facing against the wall, compressed on the way in with some room reverb on the way in, just to kind of make it feel like it's in a bigger space. And I'll go over more details, but that's where I started off. And again, as I said, this is like in my early stages. So I was kind of like still very much new to the learning that I was, to all the training that I was receiving. So things have changed a little bit since then. But alas, let's dig into it. With kick, we have the SSL channel, which was more focused on just more high end, more punch, and a little bit more click to it, really. The D6 just already having a near finished sound didn't really need, I guess, too much to it. So we got a high pass up to 40 hertz just to kill off the really super sub low lows. Boost about 7 dB, 7.5 dB of 4K. 4K is just a nice balance for me where it is still a nice top end to it, but without it feeling overly sharp. I don't know. It's just the 4 to 5K range is really pleasing to me. So still allows for a decent amount of attack, but not so much so where it's just pure click and slap and beater slap. So that's what I like. 3.5K, 6 dB of that. I think I took away a tiny bit of 350-ish. Yeah, 350-ish. Just like a tiny bit of mud, but I don't think it really needed that. I mean, just considering that the D6 is already scooped as is, it's not really, I guess, too much of a difference. But a little bit of a bell curve, 60 hertz, about 6 dB there. I always liked a little bit of a sub to my kick and just having a little more energy and just, it's more than just having like that sort of chest punch. It's really just about having that sort of weight to it underneath, really. Compression, 3-to-1 ratio, fast release, slow attack. You guys have probably seen the settings before and are familiar with this sort of style of compression, which is just more front end attack. So it's just making it more of what it is. That is going into the Oxide Tape by Universal Audio, which has now become pretty much my favorite saturation plugin. I don't know what it is about the tape, the Oxide Tape, but just the way that it fills out low mids, just the way that it saturates and really just gives it that mojo to all source tracks. So like guitars, vocals, in this case, the kick, it's just, I don't know, just something to it. So I really like how that's sounding. And all I did was use a warm kick setting and just dialed the input to taste. And that's what we got. And I think towards the end, I wanted a tiny touch more of click. So, at the time I did try Oxygen out and it got me there. I probably could have just done a re-EQ sort of like high shelf boost or maybe a little more in the SSL, but we had just a little touch more with Oxygen, but that's sad. And that's where we ended up on kick. So by itself, here's what it sounds like. Yeah, so pretty much a D6, just a little bit more top into it, really, and a little bit of tape in there. So that's that. Going on to the snare top, I think it was quite heavy-handed as far as processing, but that's okay because that's pretty much what I was going for anyways. SSL channel, high pass up to 90, I believe. A little bit of low pass up to 14K, just because a lot of that sort of white noise cymbal, like nasty sheen was bleeding a little bit into the mic, so I wanted to go ahead and control that a little bit, but not too much either. I feel that and it really depends on the genre, but when you're killing off too much cymbal, and look, I'm okay with a little bit of bleed. I like to leave a little bit of bleed. Sometimes I'll gate a little bit harder, but not so much so where it's just cutting in and out. But I don't mind bleed. That's just the nature of drums and for what they are, and just it's every little bit as part of the sound, for what it's worth. I did quite a massive boost of 8 dB at 10K bell boost. I find that, again, a little more pleasing to my ears, just because it is a good balance for a snare top between attack and a little bit of like a nice top end lift, kind of like in the upper high end range. Got about 4 dB, sorry, not 4 dB, 4K, 5 dB of that. A little bit of 2.5K, quite a bit actually, quite a bit of 200 hertz, and that's a bell boost. 3-to-1 ratio, fast release, slow attack, and gate, and that's what we have with the SSL channel, which goes into, at the time, it was Escalator, which a lot of you guys know, it's just a one knob saturation plugin. I just drove it a little bit, and I still felt like maybe something was missing, so I think I really was leaning on this Oxide Tape a lot, which I used the warm snare preset, drove the input to taste, and just kind of got the meter to where I liked it best and where I thought it sounded best. And then that's feeding into the Universal Audio 1176, slow attack, fast release, 4-to-1 ratio, drove the input to where it got about 3 to 5 dB of compression, and just to kind of give it a little bit more front end attack to it. So, and then just rounding that off with a clipper, pretty straightforward. Again, just I don't know, it feels like it gives it a little bit more body to it, and it just kind of hits a little bit harder that way. And that snare also, like, forgot to mention, the kick and the snare also feeding to my crush bus as well, which we'll get into later. But within itself, though, this is what we got. Cool. So we got that. Snare bottom, pretty simple. SSL channel. I used a CLA snare bottom preset, and I pretty much just left it as is. I don't think I bothered too much with snare bottom, and especially at the time, I just wanted something a little bit more easier to really mix in at the time. So that's what I stuck with. Overheads went a little more heavy-handed than I would have liked, but that's okay. So we went in with a pretty aggressive high pass, to which does take away a lot of the snare and a lot of everything around the kit, which I probably could have used. But alas, it was more focused on cymbals and just a little top end high shelf boost, really. That's it. A little bit of compression along the way in. So drove the input to get a decent amount of gain reduction. So slow, medium attack, fast release, 4-to-1 ratio. That's sad. Nothing really too crazy. The rooms, which again were already compressed on the way in and were ran through a room emulation reverb, were also processed with an SSL, which just did a little bit of filtering. Little bit of I think just 50 hertz sub that was just kind of bothering me. 1176, just kind of crushing it a little bit more. 8-to-1 ratio, relatively fast attack, fast release. And then the C4 at the time, I think when I was trying to use it before, was just to control the cymbals a little bit. I didn't necessarily want to kill those upper frequencies, but I wanted to tame it just a little bit so that the cymbals weren't getting too out of control, because on the way in, it was starting to get a little bit too hot in the top end, sort of like that very sharp, almost fatiguing high end. But alas, this is what we got. Let me go ahead and get back to the overheads first. Again, a little bit more cymbal focus, nothing really too crazy there. But that's sad. Rooms, here's what we got. I mean, that's honestly one of the most impressive things about that I was able to get out of these tracks is the rooms, just because I record everything out of a small 10 by 15 room. So it is pretty dry in here, but the bathroom just being so tiny as is and being able to manipulate those microphones and that sound just gives me so much more width and space to the drums that it almost feels like it's being tracked in a much larger room, and it's pretty freaking awesome. So hi-hats, did an aggressive high pass. Didn't really feel like I needed a lot to it other than just the cymbals. And I could have probably added more top end with a high shelf, but for some reason I added oxygen. Again, I was just messing around with oxygen at the time. Just trying it out since I had it. And it did the job for what I needed it for at the time. Ride cymbal, it's pretty much the same deal. I did a top end boost and a little quite aggressive high pass, which could have gotten less with it, but I really just didn't really think I needed anything else at the time. I compressed it with the 1176 and just to kind of have a little bit more attack to it, and that's it really. Going on to my crush bus, it is the SSL comp, which is on the pumpy preset. So it's a pretty aggressive compressor, which my kick and snare are being fed into. So all you're really getting is just a lot of pumping, as the name suggests, and you're getting just that aggressive in your face. I mean, if you guys know parallel compression, you know how this works, right? Just want to more smack, more front end, and just kind of doing that and just driving it more with the escalator, and really just gives it that much more weight for the kick and the snare. So the drums, here's what we got soloed. Section. As you can also hear, I use the UAD pure plate on my snare. So right over here, my snare is being fed into this. I have the nice drum plate setting. I freaking love the pure plate. It is pretty much my go-to for plate sounds. And yeah, it's pretty pretty sweet. Just the way that it spreads everything out and just adds a lot more life to, your source tracks for whatever it is. In my case, actually in this case, a snare. Just, you can't go wrong with a nice little play reverb, right? You just have to. It's just part of the sound really when it comes to drums. Just nice big sounds. But on the drum bus, I didn't really do actually I can say I didn't really do quite a lot. I did do quite a bit, but it's just more of, again, making the drums have a little more front end, a little more punch kind of in your face. Just naturally as a drummer, I always believe drums, there's a lot more weight and energy that drums carry than I think a lot of people don't, I think, kind of forget, right? There's so much to it. There's so much life to it that I think you want to be able to bring in with the drums that help carry the song through. Starting off with the Pultec, I got a little bit of the 12K boost with a little bit of attenuation, 100 hertz boost, 2 dB of that, broadband with it. Was pretty much like the drum kit punch of presence preset, but dialed in a little more accordingly to what I liked. And that is that. Just gives them more of the analog sound to the drums, a little more beef, a little more top end, and that's that. The 1176 running through it is more bringing the drums forward, not so much squashing it and trying to compress it hard, just kind of putting things together, really, for lack of a better word. Even though it has the Fab Drums preset, I just realized that's not the sound that I wanted to go, so I just dialed everything to taste. Slow attack, fast release, 4-to-1 ratio, pretty standard right there. Clipper, again, just bouncing off of the other plugins, just bringing the drums that much more to the forefront. So pretty straightforward there. Limiter, this is not really doing any limiting as much as just making sure that it's catching any sort of peaks so that it is not like peaking too hard or anything like that, really. So it's not changing the sound. It's just there as kind of like a safety net for the drums itself, since we have quite a bit of like peaks happening and a lot of like punch happening with these tracks. So that's that. Yeah, I mean that's really it for the drums. Again, like as far as effects, like I said, the only effect is really the snare plate. Everything else is pretty much done all together within this section. And yeah, I just recorded everything as a one take. And as far as automation, the main automation that I really did was just vocal writing, was just writing the faders for the kick and the snare so that they stay on top, so that that's pretty much the forefront. Whereas everything else, like the hi-hat and the ride, for example, only came in when they needed to, and that's it. So as you can see right here, the hi-hats are pretty much turned down here, but then when the hi-hats are being played, they're turned up. Same thing with the ride. Rooms, I didn't do any automation. They pretty much stayed static, which I felt was perfectly fine anyways during this time. And then the overheads, I pretty much just accented the crash hits a little bit, quite a bit. So that's that. Not really too much happening other than just pretty standard automation where you're just trying to keep things pretty consistent and just driving things when they need to. So obviously, like, for the, for like the start of the choruses, or even when the band comes back in after the solo, leading into the intro, just, bumping up those faders a little bit just to give it that much more drive and energy, right? So that's that for drums. Not a ton, I would say. Going into guitar land, my lead guitarist, Jordan, tracked everything through a non-American made PRS SE guitar. I don't know the exact specifications of it, but we ran that through the it's just a standard Marshall MG FX. I think that's what it's called. It's like very much lower end Marshall head, but you know what? Makes it sound good. He knows what he's doing with it, and I see no problem with it. And we tracked everything through just one SM57 with the microphone placed in between the center of the cone and the edge of the speaker. We find that that's pretty much our sweet spot as far as guitar tones. And one thing I forgot to mention before I continue on through is that minus the vocals and the actually, yeah, just minus the vocals, all the tracks were recorded through the UAD Helios Type 69 preamp, but only some tracks had a little bit of extra gain on them, but otherwise no tracks had EQ on the way in. So like the kick and snare had a little bit of extra drive on the gain. I already went through the rooms. Guitars really just had a little bit of extra gain pushed into them to give it a little bit more mojo, a little bit more saturation on the way in, but not pretty much no EQ on the way in. So just they pretty much were recorded how they came. And yeah, so recorded with the SM57 for the guitars, and we just only did a couple tracks. So we did a left, right, a filter, well, actually, rather a wall track, which I then filtered afterwards. Outro is pretty much like an outro harmony guitar track that we added on to, I think, like the last bar of the song just to help finish off that ending strong, which I'll showcase in a little bit. Scratch is pretty much the guitar solo, if you will, during the after the bridge of the song, or rather during the bridge, however you want to see it as. And so that's sad. And the solo was just an added bonus that that my lead guitarist Jordan decided to add to kind of give, he wanted to do like this very bluesy solo leading to some shred, and just it was really cool to hear this because it really gave that song just that extra edge towards the end to really finish off strong. So going through guitar land, here's what we got for the main guitars left and right. Let's see, here we go. Let's go into the chorus. And as you can see, the way they have them labeled, I have one that's labeled bass and the other one which is labeled treble. And the reason being is because obviously, as the name suggests, the one track was more low and heavy, one track was more top end heavy, and just blending those two together kind of gives it the illusion that it was tracked by two different guitars, so that there's a little bit of differentiation between the sounds, so that it was not too just given the fact that it's a Rage recording, I wanted it to feel, again, a little bit more, I guess, unique, a little different in its own way, just have two separate tracks. So that's that. The wall track, which I had heavily filtered, was pretty much this. And as you can see, I turned off the effects in between so you can kind of get an idea of what it sounded like. But the wall was just there to kind of be the center between both guitars, to have something kind of to fill in that space, right? It's not super audible, but it's there, again, just to fill out that space right there. Outro, again, this was just I guess we call it a guitar harmony track to help. That was help complement the main guitars. So here's what we got. All right, going to the scratch track, which again, it was the guitar solo. Yeah, I really wanted to try to get it close to the original track, but obviously that's very hard when you don't exactly have a kill switch setup. So, funny story about this. Since his PRS didn't have a kill switch on it, we were trying to think, okay, how are we going to do this? There was no way to just try to do a kill switch kind of effect with a volume pedal or anything. So what we found was, by the way, thank you to our rhythm guitarist, Ryan. Even though we didn't ask him for permission to use his second guitar, we took his Gretsch hollow body that was sitting here, which had a switch, and I forgot if it was a tone switch or volume switch, but it's basically allowed my other guitarist Jordan to be able to create that sort of kill switch effect where once he flicks the switch up and down, it cuts off the signal in between. So between that and being able to have, turning up the treble on the amp and really just having to create that motion with like the scratching and everything, like that's pretty much how we got the desired sound. So a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of just kind of fiddling with knobs and everything to get that sound, but ultimately we got it, and that's what we got so far. Solo, again, just bluesy solo to some shred in there. It was, oh man, this was perfect. So here's what we got for this. Absolutely love it. So that was pretty cool. Let's go into plugins. Really just breaking down the entire chain. So, um, I would say there was not a ton that were done to the guitars, small little moves. But it was just more of just kind of cleaning things up a little bit, taking off some extra top end that made some of the guitars a little bit too shrieky. But alas, not really just dialing things here and there. The left guitar, it had, the SSL, a little bit of a high pass up until 90 hertz, a little bit of AK boost, and that's it. No compression or anything else to it, just a little bit of AK. And I know this was supposed to be the sort of like the contrast to the treble track, but I still wanted to try to get it a little closer so that tone wise, they're sort of sitting together a little more a little more closer within each other. So not exact. You still have two different tracks that you can kind of like distinct, but still close enough to where it's not too totally different. That's going into a standard Reaper EQ, which has a couple notches. So one at 3.2K, one at 5.1K, just to cut out a little bit of that noise, and just a little bit of low pass up until 18K, because obviously like that white noise that's just sizzle that's there. Didn't really need it, and we just had to remove it. And that's going into the oxide tape, which is driven really hard. So pretty much this needle is being pinned, which I freaking love. Gonna bypass it with it on. I don't know. Like I'm telling you, I don't know what it is about this plugin, but it's just giving it that extra mojo. It's just rounding off top end. It's just making it feel that much warmer, and just it's like a softer end, I think, of overdrive, where it's just adding that much more saturation, adding that much more kind of beefiness to the guitar, but it's not so much so where it's just completely like over distorting it, over processing it. So I don't know, man. Just really love how it sounds. And then I just leveled everything off with an LA3A just to kind of keep things more controlled, and that's really it. The right guitar got more cuts than boosts, and again, I had to go a little more heavy-handed because I think afterwards I found that some of the higher frequencies were just becoming a little bit too sharp, so I had to dial back. So 2.2K, 2.6K, 4K, 5.3K, and then the high pass again. Again, just like, these are still two totally different tracks, and they still sound like it, but it's still not too totally different after the processing to where like it's totally doesn't completely complement each other. That's also being fed into the oxide tape. Again, I'm just driving it hard, so the needle is pretty much being pinned down, and I freaking love it. It's so good with the LA3A, and that is it. So couple cuts, oxide tape, LA3A, that is it. Nothing really too much to it. These two plugins are mainly being automated when the band drops. So it's going to be during this section after the guitar solo is when these two are being automated. Actually, sorry, just the SSL is being automated. So it's just more filtering during this section right here. This Rio EQ is just to dip down this so that when the outro comes in, it has its space to fill in. So, you know, you have the outro being able to be heard. And now this right guitar is just kind of sitting back a little bit so that gives it more space. So that's really what all it's doing. The wall, all I did was just aggressive filtering. So high pass, low passive filtering. Really just wanted to create a more mid-range telephone sound. I did a little bit of dipping in some like harsh frequencies like 3.2K and like at least for the wall, because the wall was just so much treble. Just needed a little bit of taming to control it. And I did even more filtering. So, hey, like whatever gets me the sound that I need. And that's that. So, I mean, that's what that sounded like. I didn't really want the wall to stick out too much. I think like it was fine just kind of being a compliment, but not so much so where it's like the forefront and to where maybe it could probably feel a little bit too upfront. So I just kind of left it right there as is. Outro guitar, not really much. I just did some filtering, a little bit of 1.5K, and a couple dips, really, just to clean it up, just that much more. And then just an LA3A just to keep things consistent, leveled, and that's that. That's really it for the outro. Nothing really too crazy there. The scratch guitar, again, the guitar solo, nothing too crazy. Up to 220 high pass filter, a little bit of 1.5K just to kind of make it pop a little more, I suppose. Drove it really hard with the escalator just to give it that much more grit to it. It was too treble focused and not enough like girth to it, if that makes sense. Not enough saturation on it, just to kind of make things, round things out a little bit. LA3A, because, with a scratch guitar like this, it was really peaky and I needed to have a little more control over it. So that's that. That is also being fed to a guitar delay, which I kept the drive first, but I was encouraged to throw it into a delay to give it a little more space, and loved it. Loved it. So that was a really good touch to it. Solo is SSL filtering, so up to 10K, up to 180 hertz. Dipped out a little bit of 3.5K. Just I think the way his settings were set up, I think it was a little too shrieky. More focus on 1K area. Just a low pass filter up to 16K. Little dip in 4.8K, and just keeping things consistent with the LA3A. Really nothing, again, too much to it. Just more dips, kind of running things off. And that's also being fed to my guitar delay, which is the Warm Slap preset through the Galaxy Tape Echo by Universal Audio, which I also have a little bit of high pass just to kind of clean up the low end there. But these are pretty much what the settings are like. Pretty standard. As far as automation for the guitars, I pretty much kept it to where it just was trying to keep everything consistent so that they stay on top. They're driving the song, but not so much so where it's like there's aggressive boosts and dips. It's just more of like kind of bumping things up and just kind of filling out the song. So I pretty much did all my automation on the main guitar bus. You see these aggressive ones over here. That's because it was during that sort of filter sweep section. So if you listen to this by itself, this right guitar sort of panning to the left. And then, of course, there's a EQ automation there so that when it band comes back in, it's back to where it needs to be. So that's pretty much all that it's doing. The guitar bus doesn't really have anything. This distortion is sweeping. Resonant filter was more or less again for this section so that it does that lo-fi kind of effect, but it's also sweeping it left and right, just kind of giving that modern, again, filter sort of effect that we all have heard plenty of times. So that's sad. This Pultic is not doing anything. I threw it on there. I just needed to round off the top end just a little bit, I found, and I threw the Pultic on there. And that's it. I didn't do any boosting, cutting, nothing. I felt that, okay, it was enough. It got to where I needed to, just warmed up and gave the guitars a little bit more of that analog sound to it. And I stuck with it. That's all I needed. So nothing really there on the guitar bus. So everything's pretty much straight within the individual tracks. But yeah, like I said, automation, nothing really too crazy. Again, just automating things so that they stay on top of each other, but nothing too heavy-handed. Now going into bass, I think this and vocals are where I went quite a bit more aggressive on processing because there was a sound that I had in my head, which may not sound the best on its own, but within the track, it just, it served its purpose, and that's all I care about, really. As far as bass, we tracked everything through my rhythm guitarist Ryan had a Yamaha bass. I don't know the model, but pretty standard Yamaha bass. We did the bass amp. Our bass amp was the UAD Ampeg simulation. It's the standard classic Ampeg sound and emulation. So nothing really to it. I think we just did a rock preset, dialed a couple things in, and left it at that. And captured a DI. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, again, I went pretty heavy-handed as far as processing on it because I had a sound in my head. But breaking down the bass, we have two different sets of tracks. We have a bass solo and the actual bass track. So for those who know the original song, there's a little, I guess you can call it a solo as we call it, just a couple extra little bass riffs that happen during the bridge that we wanted to bring out. And so I have it on its own separate track. So starting off with the bass, again, the DI, I wanted that to be my dirty signal, really dirty signal. So I used the raw plugin by Universal Audio and just used the raw power preset, dialed it in, and that got me that just distorted sound. It's just nasty, along with like some filtering with the SSL. I mean, this is what we got. I mean, it's not super pleasant on its own, but I mean, just with the regular bass tone, it just gave it some grind to it, right? I wanted it to be super fuzzy, maybe really compressed, a lot more than I thought I was going to do, but that's what I wanted, and that's what I went with, and I had fun with this. So that was cool. The bass amp track itself, I think I just needed to compress a little bit of the sub because I think it was becoming a little bit too much, which I could have probably reamped the DI and got a new bass amp tone, but I didn't, so I figured this was the best plan of action as far as cleaning up the super low lows of the bass amp track. And I think I just dipped out a little bit at, 266 hertz. I think there was like a little bit of honkiness going on, but this is the bass amp track. Yeah, really nothing too crazy when you put these two together with all the effects and everything. Again, not super pleasant. It can be easily seen as like a very just too dirty of a sound and maybe not as clean or. But again, that's just what I wanted. I just wanted to smash this thing really hard. So going into the bass processing on the bass bus, not including, the bass solo track. I actually did, I feel like, quite a bit. I compressed it pretty hard, medium to fast-ish attack, fast release. Drove the input to it, got about, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10 dB of gain reduction. SSL channel, bell boost at 1.5K, another boost at 1K, and more at 80 hertz, and no compression or anything else, just EQ to just drive it even harder as far as like the top end and presence of it. And some of you know this already, which is, the C4 trick where you're just bypassing every band except for the lows, and you're just compressing it hard and being able to bring up the amount of gain that you need back as far as like low end. So I did that, and that's going into another 1176, which is pinning at that point, 4-to-1 ratio, medium fast attack, actually rather medium attack, fast release, etc. And I just wanted to make sure that there was enough bass in general as far as like frequency wise. So I just boosted a little bit with this bass booster at like 80 hertz, which, just to kind of bring some of that back. And then just to give it enough that sort of tape saturation, drove it quite a bit with the electric bass big preset through the oxide tape. And that's what we got. Again, quite heavy-handed, which may look like a lot, and it probably is quite a bit, but for the song, it served its purpose, and I'm pretty happy with what I got out of it for this song. The bass solo track was mainly just, a little bit filtering. I needed it to stick out quite a bit, so quite a bit of 1.5K, quite a bit more of 1.5K, which I could have done more here, but I did it on 2 different bands, filtering, and that's it. Drove it a little bit with the escalator, and 1176, and this is what we got. Again, just wanted it to be nice and dirty. Again, I just copied the DI and the bass effects from the original track onto the bass solo track, so all that's really changed is just the bus processing, but ultimately they're basically around the same. And as you noticed for like automation here, there's a couple little bits where when he's playing bass, he's just kind of plucking the strings to kind of keep rhythm with himself. So I just kind of automated the volume of that down so that the bass solo could come through a lot more. So just so like those plucks weren't really getting in the way, and just to kind of dip that out. So we have this. Yeah, I mean, that's it for bass, really. I think right here as well, as far as automation, I did a little bit of extra C4 because I think there were a couple hits that I just needed to have a little bit more control because they were a little too strong. But alas, that's pretty much what that's there for. And I mean, that's really it. There's nothing really too heavy-handed as far as like the bass automation. It's just a matter of keeping the bass nice and strong. Again, right in the fader a little bit so that it's there, it fills out the low end, and that's it. I didn't really have to think much as far as like trying to do too much automation with it, aside from the bass solo. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty freaking straightforward, I would say. Nothing too much. That's that for bass. Going into vocal land. So for this one, Steven actually sent me the vocals, and he sent them to me completely dry with an SM58. It's the handheld dynamic microphone, which we've all seen. No compression or anything on the way in. So when I got the tracks, he sent me about 4 different takes. I ran all the takes through my hardware compressor. So I pinned it quite a bit so you can get some compression on the way in, get everything nice and leveled. So what you see here are pretty much the compressed tracks right before they've been mixed. So you have a nice healthy vocal track to work with before we start processing and everything. And this one was really fun to do because of the fact that I had the idea to kind of create and manipulate some of the vocals to create some fake stereo harmonies, create some fake gang style vocals, and just manipulate the vocals in a certain way to where it allowed me to fill in some empty spots so that Steven can still come through, but also you have a little bit of extra edge to it, right? Um, just again, just when when we want when we wanted people to listen to a song, we want them to feel energized. We want them to feel like they can just, like feel a little bit of anger, not in a violent way, but just have a little bit of momentum going in them. And I really wanted that to be the case with the vocals. So I processed them pretty heavily, drove them a lot with saturation, and they're pretty compressed. But that's again the sound that I wanted. I wanted Steven's vocals to be right in your face so that anytime he's going aggressive, you feel it. You feel that sort of like momentum and anger and like really just presence in front of you. So that was my goal with it. You can see here there's duplicates. So it's quite a lot to go through here, but the vocals by itself, here's what we got. So let's start right here in the chorus. Actually, let's do the verse.
Body and soul around the face of Mother Earth gets bigger. The trigger's called empty your purse. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells.
So like, as you can hear, like they're pretty processed, and that's okay. Again, that's what I wanted out of these tracks. So let's start off with Vox 1. So Vox 1, Vox 2, Vox 3, Vox 4 are pretty much the main tracks. And then these duplicates and then this harmony track are pretty much stuff that I created and manipulated. So all main vocal tracks are pretty much going to have the same processing. So nothing really much changes here. So we just started off with compression, a heavy amount of compression. So this thing is pretty much pinned down. 4:1 ratio, medium attack, fast release. And it's obviously the 1176, the Bluey edition. Going into a hefty amount of AK on the vocal, a little bit of high pass, heavy amount of 2K, heavy amount of 1K. I mean, I just wanted this thing to be bright, as you can tell. Probably a little bright, but you know what? I'm okay with that, and I just was living. I was pretty much having fun with this. And that's going into the Oxide tape plugin, which I drove quite a bit again just to give Steven's vocals a little bit more of that analog saturation and just rounding off the top end a little bit so it's not just purely SSL, AK all the way. It's a little bit of roundness to it. And that is going into Sibilance, which is a de-esser, and it's a pretty straightforward de-esser. So not really a whole lot to say about this. It's just de-essing the voice and making it a lot more manageable to listen to. And this one for Waves does a really good job because you could just drop it down, dial in the threshold, and you're pretty much set. It's not really a whole lot to it. So, which is then going to Escalator. I think towards the end, I think there was a little more saturation that needed to happen to give, again, Steven's vocals that much more girth and aggression. So we just drove it a little bit more with the Escalator, and that's what we got. And it's finished off with a limiter just to catch any sort of peaks. That's it. Really nothing else to it. And that's all being fed into my vocal delay, which is the Galaxy Tape Echo. And then that delay was being fed into a Vox plate, but the plate is only being automated during certain sections where I need just a little bit more width and spread and just a little bit more push for Steven's vocals. And then that's also being fed into a room. Again, I wanted to put things together so that nothing's too separated. I wanted it to feel like you were there with the band, with everyone, as if you were at a live show. So I think that's what we got here. And again, same chain goes for all main vocal tracks. Vox 2, let's start off with the beginning of Vox 2 Duplicate. So during the sort of like these moments right here where he shouts, "Hey."
What? Hey!
During the intro of the track. By itself, I felt like...
What?
I felt like it was missing a little bit, just more of low end, kind of like a fill in. So I just duplicated that track. I went ahead and drove it 100% with saturation and pitched it down 200 cents. I mean, I'm not one to really know how much to do. I just pitched it down to where I liked it, and that's what we got. So by itself, this is what we have.
Hey!
So it's pretty freaking cool, actually.
What?
So you put both together,
What? Hey!
just again fills in Steven's vocals, just adds more weight to it. And going deeper into the duplicates, so let's start off with Vox 3 duplicate, which is going to be this guy right here. Vox 3 duplicate, which I believe was sort of vocal doubler during the choruses. So during the choruses right here.
With a pocket full of shells, they really run the family. With a pocket full of shells, with a pocket full of shells.
So I think I remember taking the original third take of the vocals. I created the duplicate track, and just so there's a little bit of differentiation, and from the, instead of creating like another Vox 2, I wanted to create a Vox 2 duplicate, just so there's a little bit of differentiation as far as like the vocals, since they had different performances. With Vox 3, same thing here as far as like the duplicate. Actually, you know what? This one I didn't pitch it down. I just drove it hard with saturation, and just to fill in the chorus lines a little bit more.
With a pocket full of shells,
That's it, really.
with a pocket full of shells, they really run
Again,
the
having
family.
that doubling effect, right? So I did one for chorus 1, and then I did one. Actually, no, just chorus 1. Yeah, okay, so I did do one for chorus 1, and then I did the fourth main vocal track. I used that as my doubler during the second chorus, whereas Vox 3 was my main chorus vocal. So this is what we got.
Rally round the family. With a pocket full of shells. With a pocket full of shells.
Again, just so not all vocal doubles are the same, I wanted to have a little bit of difference there. Going into this part right here, this is where I started creating had the idea to do like these fake stereo harmonies, which I didn't have, but I thought, you know what, like before the second chorus came in with the pocket full of shells, that line, I wanted it just aggression. Like you already had an aggressive center vocal. I'm like, I wanted that to be spread out on the sides and just lean into it more. So what I did was, I think vocal 2 ended up being my left side stereo harmony, whereas Vox 2 duplicate ended up being my right side harmony. And I drove a little bit more of saturation in there. So pretty much the effect you get between these two is the following.
Pocket full of shells. Pocket full of shells.
Actually, yeah, Vox 2 duplicate was already pitched down as well, so just
Pocket full of shells.
it's just nasty.
Pocket full of shells.
So when you have all the vocals together,
Pocket full of shells. Rally round the family.
I mean, yeah, really leaning into it. So that's what I wanted it to be. Similar thing here with the stereo harmonies, right?
Bulls on parade.
So this is pitched down.
Bulls on parade. Bulls on parade.
So of course, obviously, like if you listen to it by itself, it's not perfectly pitched down. It's not like, it's obviously sounds artificial, but within the context of the song, you don't really notice that too much. You just notice that there's space filled in there. Think Vox 3, yeah, nothing really much to it as far as that. Nothing much more, rather. So the last part, as far as like these duplicates and harmonies, was in the outro, and that's where this harmony track really comes in, which I just did some SSL filtering, a little bit of boost, and like in the top end, and just some saturation, really. And I created these out of 2 vocal tracks, which I did manipulate prior to create this stereo, set of harmonies. And my goal was to have sort of like this gang vocal effect. So, it's not, a ton of layers on top of another, but it's enough to where it just fills in that gap. So when you listen to it by itself, sorry, all together with the vocals, like, including that stereo harmony.
Bulls on parade! Bulls on parade! Bulls on parade!
Versus without it,
Bulls on parade!
it gets there, gets the job done. But, again, just when I think of this, I think of it as, imagine an audience just chanting Bulls on Parade at the end of a show. Like, you want that to feel like an audience chant. You want to chant with it. So it's like, yeah, like let's do it. Like, let's lean into it, right?
Bulls on parade!
And that's where the extra play comes in, and just that extra like nastiness, and just driving his vocals hard and not being afraid to just have at it, really. And that really, was one of the biggest highlights with the vocals, was just hearing that together. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this feels like I am there with the band. It's so cool. And I just drove a little bit more saturation as far as automation, like literally as the gang vocals got progressed on through, I just drove a little more saturation, a little more saturation, a little more saturation till the end, and that's what we got. So that is that as far as the vocal tracks. Automation really is pretty much standard as everything else, where it's just kind of keeping things leveled on top of each other. There's some extra automation of saturation and a little bit of extra plate that were introduced, but not really enough for me to really dive into. I think it's just, again, a little bit more push here and there in some of the areas. And that's it, really. Just vocal bus, that's what I forgot. Okay, so LA2A into the oxide tape, it was like just a tiny bit of extra leveling there. I drove the vocals harder with the oxide tape, again, because I wanted more girth in his vocals. Overall sibilance, control, and then just a limiter to catch everything. And again, just driving all the vocals into that room so that there's a space for it to live instead of having to feel so isolated and by itself, right? So, like these tracks, when you're listening to them, obviously there's a lot of extra noise and preamp gain and all this stuff, but I didn't really care. Like, when you listen to everything all together, you hear the energy, you hear the saturation, you hear everything that is there, and that's okay. And I freaking love leaning into, right? Leaning into the fuzz of the bass, leaning into the saturation of the vocals, leaning into the punchiness of the drums, overdriving the guitars a little bit just to give it that, like, whatever gets me, whatever got me to that point of where we were happy and we wanted to, just do whatever we can. So that's that, really. As far as the entire mix goes, on the mix bus, I just literally have an SSL, which is only almost doing nothing, really. It's just keeping everything together. And then his limiter was just, again, just catching peaks if needed, which I don't think it ever happened, but that was just sort of like a safety net for me. So I think I could have gone without this, but again, it's not really needed. It doesn't change anything much. I printed everything down to its final print track, which is down here, which was sent off to my go-to guy, Jamie King, for mastering. And so that is really that. I don't recall really going into anything else other than this was my first recording that I probably done as I was still in the learning stages of trying to get better recordings and learning audio and such. So having this session was a big learning experience for me. And what was really cool that just came to mind was the workflow involved, because I really didn't think twice about recording the tracks and then bringing it over to a mix template. I was pretty much mixing this as I went. So when the drums are done, I started processing those. When the guitars and the bass came in, I processed everything together to a solid instrumental track, sent that to Steven. He sent me the vocals back, and then it just took me a little bit of time to get the vocals in. And that's what we have. And I just found that workflow for me was pretty fun in the sense that it allowed me to be engaged the entire time, so that I wasn't waiting to mix stuff. It's like, if I had an idea, all right, I'm going to mix them in. I'm going to start automating ideas in, because I don't want to forget about it, and I did not want to lose that sense of creativity. So, even then, in between, as you can see, I kept everything, I'd say, relatively well organized. I had all my effects on separate buses, all my vocal tracks are brown, and just really keeping everything as organized and as color coordinated as best as possible. Just to, move through the session relatively with ease. So that's that, and I just can't wait to continue doing more of these. These covers have been really fun to do, and just gives me more stuff to work with and practice along to. So, with that being said, if anyone has any questions, anything they would like to ask, just anything you want to know about this session, about these tracks, about what I do, please let me know. My goal is to share information so that we can all learn from one another. So I can learn from you guys can learn from me, and hopefully pick out something. And just the more practice I do with these videos, the more it allows me to just get better at this. And again, we're all a community. We're all here to help each other and just help make each other the best version of one another as best as possible. So, thank you guys for taking the time to check this out. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Later.